name's Kevin Murphy. I'm from Camarillo, California, and my question is, what do you look for when determining if a person is honest or not?
Well, that's a good question, Kevin. I think generally Charlie and I can do pretty well with the situations we see, but we have to have some evidence of behavior in front of us, and I would say even there's some occupations where we're going to expect to find a higher percentage of people who behave well than in others. But if we work with someone over a period of a few months or more, I think we can come up with a pretty high batting average in terms of how they behave. At Solomon, I think I was able to separate out the people who I felt very good about and the people I was a little more nervous about fairly quickly among the ones I worked with actively. But how you spot that precisely, leave your lunch money on their desk sometime. Yeah, maybe you'll find out in a hurry. But we like people. The great example, is somebody like a Tom Murphy, where they're just bending over backwards all the time to make sure that you get the better end of the deal, or that doesn't mean they aren't competitive. I mean, if you play him a golf game for money or something like that, he wants to win the worst way. But there are people that they don't take credit for things that they didn't do. In fact, they give you credit for some of the things that maybe they did. And you can get a feel for it over time. And Charlie, you have any good guidelines on that?
Yes, I think that people leave track records in life, and so somebody at your age should figure that by the time he's 22 or 3, he will have left quite a track record, and the world will be able to figure you out. So I think track records are very important, and if you start early trying to have a perfect record and in some simple thing like honesty, you're well on the way to success in this world.
Johnny Agnelli one time told me, he said, when you get older, you have the reputation you deserve. He said, you can get away with it for a while early on, but by the time anybody gets to be 60 or so, they very probably have the reputation you deserve. And the truth is, you can have the reputation that you want. If you list all of the things that you admire in other people, you'll find out that almost everything you list, you may not be able to kick a football 60 yards or something of that sort, but almost everything you list in the people that you admire and like, they're qualities that you can have if you just set out to do that. Did Ben Franklin do that, Charlie?
Oh, sure. I always say that to get what you want is to deserve what you want.
I'll have some more peanut brittle. Charlie, with all that time to prepare, what do you have to say about education?
Well, I certainly agree with Milton Friedman that it would be hard to name one factor, if we could fix it, that would be more worthy of fixing than the education, where the failures are so horrible in many big cities particularly. So, yes, I think it's a terrible problem, and it needs fixing. Of course, there's a huge debate as to what the best way is to fix it. And I am skeptical myself of big city school systems getting fixed under their own momentums. In other words, I'm quite sympathetic to the people who say we may have to go to an alternative like vouchers. That the incentive structure has gotten so bad in some places that you can't fix it with evolution. It takes revolution. Warren, you're more optimistic about it.
Well, I'm not necessarily more optimistic. I probably feel, though, that democracy without a good public school system available to the entire population is sort of a mockery, because there's so much inequality to start with. I mean, it isn't just inequality of money, but I mean, my kids, whether they inherit any money, or your kids, whether they inherit any money, compared to the kids of somebody where both parents are struggling to keep the place going, or maybe just one parent and living in poverty. I mean, it is so unequal to start with that if you accentuate maybe just one parent and living in poverty, I mean, it is so unequal to start with that if you accentuate giving those who are generally higher up, who have chosen the wrong womb, I think that's just, I don't think the society should tolerate that, or a rich society should tolerate it. That doesn't mean it's easy to solve, because I've said a lot of times that unfortunately it seems like a good public school system is like virginity, that it can be preserved but not restored. And it's very hard when you get a system that's lousy to do much about it, because under those circumstances the wealthy people are going to all opt out of the system, and they're going to be less interested in the bond issues, they're going to be less interested in the PTA, they're going to be less interested, all opt out of the system, and they're going to be less interested in the bond issues, they're going to be less interested in the PTA, they're going to be less interested in the other people's children if they have all opted out, and another for the poor, with the poor being getting the poor system strikes me as doing nothing but accentuating inequality and other problems that result from that in the future. So I don't know the answers on improving the system. I read some of the experiments that take place, but I do believe, to start with, that if you have a good public school system as we do in Omaha, that you do your damnedest to maintain that, so that there is no incentive for the rich grandparent or the rich parent to say, I love the idea of equality, but I love my grandchildren or my child more, so I'm going to yank him from the public school system. And then you get this sort of exodus, which leaves behind only those who can't afford to make that choice. If there were a way, the idea of competition I like, and I think a good parochial system does, for example, create a better public system, and I think we've had that situation in Omaha. But I think the voucher system, if it simply amounts to giving everyone an additional amount, simply means that the rich get X dollars of the public school system subsidized, but the poor still, or whatever that differential is, remains. I mean, you could have a golf voucher system, because I play golf. I don't play very often, but if I play at the Omaha Country Club, then you could have because I play golf. I don't play very often, but if I play at the Omaha Country Club, then you could have a voucher system so that everybody in Omaha would have more access to wouldn't do the job for the guy who's on the public course, because he'd still be beyond his means to move to full-scale equality with me. I don't think there's anything more important, and I agree with Charlie totally. I think the first 8 grades, you can forget it after that. If you have the first 8 grades right, good things are going to flow, and if you have those wrong, you're not going to correct it as you get beyond that point. And I think that wrong, you're not going to correct it as you get beyond that point. And I think that on the $500 million, I think it is very tough to see results and producing results. I think it should be replicated elsewhere. I think that obviously a fellow in Chicago says that the unions have caused considerable problems in getting adjustments made, but he had the political clout behind him to overcome some of those problems. It ought to be a top national priority. We have the money to educate everybody well in this country, and the question is if we got, can we? And that's something I hope good minds like Patrick's work on. Charlie, you have anything for that?
Yeah. I think when something is demonstrably failing at performing the function to which it's assigned by a civilization, just to keep pouring more and more money into a failing modality is not the Munger system. So I'm all for taking the worst places where there's failure and trying a new modality. And it wouldn't bother me at all to have vouchers only for the poor. But I think we have to do something in our most troubled schools to change our techniques. I think it's insane to keep going the way we are.
So you go for means-tested vouchers, basically.
Well,
I don't disagree with that idea.
But all I know is where it is a terrible place to fail, and part of the trouble is ideological. If you have a absolute rule, there can't be any tracking by ability, no matter how much better reading can measurably be taught by systems that involve tracking. Well, people that brain blocked shouldn't have the power. You know, we should do what works.
Oh, you got plenty. I mean, all know it works. The problem is that once it gets beyond a certain point on a downhill slope, essentially you have the citizens that are able to do something about it essentially opt out, and that I don't know.
I am a product of the Omaha public schools, and in my day, the people who went to private schools were those who couldn't quite hack it in the public schools. That is still the situation in Germany today. I mean, private schools are people who aren't up to the public schools. I prefer a system like that. But once a big segment of that system measurably fails, then I think you have to do something. You don't just keep repeating what isn't working.
Well, I agree with that. Patrick, have you gotten your answer? Let's go to Area 5. Area 9, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Fred Strassheim, and I'm from here in Omaha. I have a question about your acquisition methodology. And I was intrigued to read in your annual report about your acquisition of Star Furniture. And as I understand the process you followed, Mr. Buffett, you met with you reviewed financials for a brief period, liked what you saw, and then you met with Mr. Melvin Wolf for 2 hours and struck a deal. And you wrote you had no need to check leases, work out employment contracts, etc.
Right.
I think that most companies, when they do acquisitions, would feel the need to do a significant amount of legal due diligence, to do things like check the leases, check into things like undisclosed environmental liability, or perhaps threatened litigation. And I guess my question is, have you ever been burned by your approach?
We've never been burned by we've been burned only in the sense that we made mistakes on judging the future economics of the business, which would have had nothing to do with due diligence. We regard what people normally refer to due diligence as really sort of boilerplate in most cases. It's a process that big companies go through, and they feel they have to go through it, and they're ignoring, oftentimes in our view, they're ignoring what really counts, which is evaluating the people they're getting in with and evaluating the economics of the business. That's 99% of the deal. You know, you may run into an environmental liability problem, one time in 100, or you may find a bad lease. I asked Melvin about, do you have any bad leases? I mean, that's the easiest way to do it. And I could read them all and try and look for every clause or something, but it isn't going to, that is not the problem. We've made lots of bad deals. We made a bad deal when we bought Hochschild Kohn, for example, the department store operation back in 1966. But it had fine people, but we were wrong on the economics of the business. But the leases didn't make any difference, or that sort of thing just was not important. And I can't recall any time that what other people referred to as due diligence would have avoided a bad deal for us.
I can't either.
No, that's 30-some years. And the key thing, you just don't want to do. I'm on various public company boards. I've been on 19 public company boards, and their idea of the due diligence is to send the lawyers out and have a bunch of investment bankers come in and make presentations and all that. And I regard that as terribly diversionary, because the board sits there, entranced by all of that, and everybody reporting how wonderful this thing is and how they've checked out patents and all that sort of thing. And nobody is focusing really on where the business is going to be in 5 or 10 years. And, business judgment about economics and people to some extent, but the business economics, that is 99% of deal making. And The rest, people may do it for their protection. I think too often they do it as a crutch, just to go through with the deal that they want to go through with anyway. And of course, all the professionals know that. So believe me, they come back with the diligence, whether due or not. And we are not big fans of that. I don't know how many deals we've made over the years, but I cannot think of anything that traditional due diligence has had a thing to do with. And
no, we've had surprises on the favorable side
yeah,
a couple of times.
That is true. That is true. The kind of people that we've generally dealt with have usually told us the bad things first and good things after we made the deal. We made a deal with a fellow over in Rockford in 1969, Eugene Abegg, the Illinois National Bank and Trust Company. I made that deal in a couple of hours. And I mean, there just wasn't any way that Gene was going to be hiding anything then. For the next 10 years, when I went over there, every time I go to lunch, he'd point out some building in town that we owned that wasn't on the books, or some foundation we had that had money in it he hadn't told me about. And he even gave me some bills, one of which I carry in my pocket, that he had still sitting around that were issued by the bank, that were our own money, which he never told me about. We could cut them out like paper dolls. I mean, Gene was not a guy to show all his cards. And those are the kind of people we've generally dealt with. And I would certainly say that that Melvin and Shirley fit that description in spades. We're now at 3:30. It's been a lot of fun this weekend. I'm glad you came, and I hope to see you next year. Thank you.